Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk to you about if you are getting ready to build on a piece of property. I wanted to talk to you about how you can actually build an ADU first and then go back and actually build your primary residence later. And this is going to pertain to the San Diego County area. And what you have to do is actually build a primary residence first, but you have to build it to where it is going to meet the San Diego County's requirements for an ADU. So what that allows you to do is allows you to set your property up to where you can build a primary residence later without having to actually make modifications to the ADU that you're going to build first, the primary, which is actually a primary residence. So the first thing that we want to look at when we're doing this is the actual size, the maximum size for a detached ADU that is allowed. So in San Diego County, that is 1,200 square feet for a detached ADU. So that's the living area of the ADU. You can have porches added onto that, and you can also have a covered porch areas and garage space added on to that ADU that do not count against that 1,200 square feet. If you go into areas like the city of Poway, you're going to have be able to go up to 1,500 square feet for the city. However, there is limitations with HOAs that you have to consider as well, and there's also different limitations on the garage sizes within those HOAs and within the city of Poway. You'll also find that other jurisdictions, other cities, are going to have different requirements. They may only allow you to go to 800 square feet or 1,000 square feet of livable area. So you're going to want to look at that the maximum size possible that you can build for a detached ADU within the city that you are actually building in, and or which actual building department has jurisdiction over the city that you are in. Say Ramona or Julian, they're going to be San Diego County Building Department. So just an example there. So make sure you're aware of the maximum size that you can build within your city. So that's step one. That will allow you to not have to change the size of the living area whenever you go to actually build the primary residence later. The next thing you want to consider is the driveway setup. So you're going to be, how is your property going to lay out? So take that in mind. You have a certain area. You're going to want to look at where's the driveway going to go in for the primary residence? Where's it going to go into the ADU? And lay that out so you can tie onto your driveway and it looks like it was planned out later when that primary residence is put in. They may have two separate entrances, but make sure you have that plan in mind of what that the end project is going to look like with both homes on the property. Another thing that's very important, and this is if you are not on a city sewer system, is you're going to have to plan out for your septic system. And the septic system can be done a number of different ways. It's going to be more economical for you is if you can put in the correct amount of leach lines one time that will support the primary residence as well as the ADU that you're building initially. So the primary residence, which is the ADU, but then it converts over to the ADU once the primary residence is built. So there's a couple things you can do. You could have one leach area, the leach lines all combined. If you can get a gravity flow system, you can have a tank for the primary residence, septic tank, and a septic tank for the ADU. And then maybe the tank for the ADU is only 1,200 gallons or 1,000 gallons, and the tank for the house is 1,500. And then those will flow down. The tight lines that come out of the tanks will flow into one main line and then go out to the leach field. So you want to make sure that when you're building the smaller home first, the ADU that will end up being the ADU, that will have a Y in the tight line that will allow you to tie the tank in from the other house. So that can work. Sometimes you can get a large enough tank, depending on the size of the primary residence, that will allow you to dump both houses into one tank. So that is consideration as well. You'd want to make sure that you have an inlet on the side or on one end of your tank, your septic tank, that would allow you to dump into that one tank. That doesn't happen a lot. It's just because of the size of the primary residence is large enough to where you're going to have a requirement to have a bigger tank, or to have the 2 tanks. So there's other systems that are more complex, where you get into an ATU system and you have to do pumping, or maybe you got one, the elevation is lower and then you have to pump, and you have surge tanks and that. So some of our other videos that we've done, you can go back and listen to, that actually covers the septic tanks and septic systems in more detail. But you definitely want to lay out your septic system for both units and possibly install the leach field for both units when you're doing this. So that would actually start with the septic layout. So when you submit the septic layout, you're going to want to show proposed primary residence in the future with an ADU being converted later, and just make sure that the health department is aware of what the intent is, so that septic layout does not have to get redone at a later time, and it'll get approved with that new primary residence, larger primary residence in the future going in. So the space for the primary system will be there, and the reserve area for that septic system. Okay, so that's septic systems. The other thing to talk about is the actual permit fees. So this is something that you'll hear about, where the actual impact fees for the ADU is waived when you're building one. That is true. However, it's only true when you're building the ADU after there's an existing primary residence on the property. So this would be your traffic impact fees, your park fees. Those would not be paid if there was a primary residence existing on the property. However, you will pay them if you are building the smaller structure, which will be the ADU later, first, because that is now considered the primary residence on the property until the actual larger home is built later. So, for instance, the traffic impact fees can be anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000. Your park fees can be anywhere, $7,500 or so within San Diego County area. You will have to pay your school fees regardless. So school fees do not get waived. Ramona area, $3.48 a square foot on the living space, so times 1,200 square feet. Poway, you're going to pay somewhere in the $4.04 range per square foot currently is what they are at. So you multiply that times the living square footage, you're going to pay those. San Diego County, you will have your fees, your permit application fees are going to be greatly reduced. I think we had one that was like $100, and then your actual building permit fees are waived currently on an ADU. That's if there's a primary residence that is already there. That will not apply when you build the smaller structure first. That you will have to pay the regular plan check fees, regular building permit fees, as if there was nothing on the property prior. Okay, so that's your permits and fees considerations. Utilities, let's go into that a little bit more. So in regards to the sewer, if you're hooked up to an actual city sewer, you will have to pay the initial fee for that sewer line, and that could be anywhere from $15,000, $30,000, depending on the municipality that you're dealing with. When you build this ADU on the front end, the smaller house on the front end, and typically when you build an ADU later, you have a primary residence that had already paid for the ADU, or for the EDU, which is the equivalent dwelling unit, for getting access to the city sewer. And then the ADU only has to pay about $1,000 a year. It's typical fee for having another unit tied in, the ADU unit tied in, for annual fee. They'll go on your taxes. Sometimes you get a bill for it, but it's a lot cheaper. You don't have to pay when you add an ADU later. You don't have to pay the $18,000 or $15,000 to $30,000 for the EDU. You can just tie into the existing trunk line on the sewer system that's already going to the primary residence. So what you want to do for when you're doing the trunk line coming out to the tie into the city sewer, when you're putting the smaller ADU first, is you want to put a Y in that so you can tie on for your primary residence later. And then you want to check with your municipality and make sure that they're not going to charge you another EDU fee, which would be or to tie back in for like it was treated as if a new home was built later, because of the order of events. So, and it would just be, you could just tie on, they just add another $1,000 a month or a year to your bill instead of charging another $15,000 to $30,000. So you want to check with them and make sure that they will treat it that way, because it's being done backwards. It's not the way that's typical that they're seeing now, where people already have a primary residence and they're adding an ADU. You're actually taking a primary residence and converting it to an ADU because you're building a new primary. So make sure you check that, because that could be a big hit on dollar amount that you're having to pay on the front end when you're doing the utility work. So another thing to consider is you have to talk to SDG&E, and you need to make sure that you're setting up properly the most economical idea in mind of how you're going to get the power, electrical power, to the house, as well as the gas lines. So for the electrical, depending on how close the ADUs are together, I believe it's 150 feet. They have to be at least 150 feet apart to where you can have a separate meter on a primary residence and separate meter on an ADU if they have that much spread between them. If not, they're requiring you to have a dual meter. So for instance, if we built the smaller structure first, that will be the ADU later, we would get a 400 amp service, be a split service that would come in and mount on the side of the ADU that we're building, a smaller structure. And it would have a 200 amp meter or two 200 amp meters, one servicing the smaller structure, and then one for the future that would service the main dwelling. And then we would take and only get a meter set for the existing structure that we're using. The future one would just be blanked off, and then we would stub out a sweep out of the slab that could then be tied onto, and the underground done going over to the main structure later. So you want to look at too for the gas, if you are on city, where you have city gas available, where you got the natural gas available and you're not on propane, where do those meters go, and what's SCG going to require as far as tying on to them. So those are considerations with the utilities, electrical, gas. Propane's pretty easy for gas, because you got to be 10 feet away from the house. Typically it's easy to just set 2 tanks, especially if you're renting out an ADU. You can put one on each, a smaller tank on the ADU and put a larger tank on the primary house, and those are, that way the bills can be separated out for utility purposes. So on the water meters, if you're doing this primary residence or the ADU first, that's considered your primary, you will have to pay your water meter fee, which would be somewhere in the ballpark of $15,000 to $30,000, depending on what your municipality is. And then what you want to check with them as well, same as we were talking about the sewer, when you tie in later and when you build this other dwelling later, the primary dwelling, making sure that they are not going to charge you a separate either $15,000 to $30,000 fee to put that other structure on there, because you're doing it backwards again. So typically what we can do, if we have a primary residence, we can actually build the ADU, and then the ADU will slide a T into that line on the existing meter, after the meter going to the house, which would be the secondary. We tie into that, and then they just send one bill, which covers the house and ADU. You can separately meter your water if you need to bill a tenant on after their meter, so you can send them a bill for the usage that they're using on the ADU. But typically people are doing that because it's so much money to actually get another water meter set for the ADU that it take a lot of water bills in order to actually make it make sense to pay that $15,000 to $30,000 over the year. So they're just splicing into that existing water meter that's already there. So those are things to think about. So if you want to actually set up to where you can maybe build something now where your budget will allow you to build a smaller structure, but you want to build that larger home later, this is a way to do it. These are things you want to take into consideration. So make sure you check the maximum size, check out the permits and fees that are involved with utilities and your building department, also your driveway layout, and make sure you're checking all your utilities as well, how those are going to tie in and what those fees are going to be. And the septic system is a big one if you're doing that on a property that does not have sewer. All right, so I hope that was helpful. If you'd like more information on building a custom home, building an ADU, or remodeling your home, you can visit our website at tfgonline.com. You'll find a ton of information on pricing and floor plans and a lot of other resources that we have available there. So thank you for your time again, and have a great rest of your day.